Thank you very much, Gordon. Can I just check, can you hear me at the back? Yes, lovely, super, thank you. Can you hear me at the front? Yes, great. So, we're delighted to be here this morning. As Gordon said, either you are here for a religious ceremony or you're not, but either way, bless you for coming. And I just want to deal with the talk title. We do passionately believe that improving visitor experience is about having a vision, having a strategy, but actually it's about the detail that is behind that. That's what we're going to talk about today. But I was told off by my colleague, who should be nameless, for this talk title, because she did think that everyone would think it was a religious talk and then maybe not come. So I just want to kind of deal with, it's a quote attributed to Mies van der Rohe, I'm sure you'll all know, famous modernist architect. The image actually was the Farnworth House, which is his sort of domestic masterpiece, and really beyond the fact that God is in the details, and you could look at it the other way, the devil is also in the details if you get it wrong, that deals with that. So I'm Stephen Spencer, we call ourselves the ambience architects. The simplest way to explain that is that you have your architect designed building, you have your museum designed, interpretation designed content, but what you have between that is the space in which visitors and the team actually operate and experience day to day. You know, and if that works in terms of a guest experience that you can deliver consistently, if it works for the team operationally, and if it works to deliver a financially sustainable operation, then you've got it right, and that's where we focus, because all of our background across many clients, is that? There we go. That we've worked for and with is actually how do we make this work and how do we make it deliver the maximum return on investment. So that's briefly me, and I'd like to introduce Suzanne.
Hello, so I'm Suzanne Buck of Flow Associates. We work in the same sector as Stephen, but we really focus on the visitor engagement and understanding what the impact is that you want to have. So when we work with museums, we generally work with the learning teams or with people that are developing strategy around organising and engaging better with their audiences. So this is us, and we've worked in many of the same places. We've actually worked in the same museum at one time, about 10 years ago. So we thought that it would be really interesting to bring our two sides of the sector together, because we're really speaking the same language to different people within the same organisations. So Stephen's going to explain more.
Thank you. Well, so just to deal with what is ambience, because we talk about being ambience architects. We've got the ambience networking lounge next door, which is really supposed to show, you know, attention to detail and trying to create a space that is fit for purpose, in this case, conducive to high-quality conversations and networking. This study by Rockefeller University was a bit of a game changer for me when I heard about it quite a few years ago, and it was based on a sort of experiential brand marketing study. So if people are exposed to a brand through all of their senses, what landed with them? And as you can see, 5% of what we see basically is what they remembered. You know, after a time they would have forgotten exactly what it was that they saw. Only 2% of what they heard, 35% of what they smell. We think smell is incredibly important, very often overlooked as part of the experience. 1% of what we touch, and 15% of what we taste. And I always call this the cod science bit, because it isn't science, but I thought to myself, well, that's only 58%, so what's the other 42%? And that's what I call the sixth sense, which is where actually, when you're curating all of the experience through all of the senses as consistently as you can, in line with your brand or your value proposition or your mission or the reasons people are visiting you, then you'll have nailed it. Your visitor will know. They'll know unconsciously, as well as in some senses consciously, that this is a place that I can trust, that I can lean into, that is getting it right in all of the details, seen and unseen, or experienced and you know, consciously or unconsciously. So that is ambience, and now what is experience design?
So alongside our consultancy work with museums and heritage organisations, we teach a course in experience design. Been teaching it for about 12 years. When we first developed it, it was the only course about experience design that wasn't UX, that wasn't talking about computers and how you engage with people with that. So it's about designing experiences for people in places. And so just to bring you on board with me, I'm going to take you really, really quickly through what is experience design. I'm going to look at each one of these factors in order, but first I'm going to tell you about the origins of experience design. So everyone should read this book. First of all, this is the first version of it. This is the more recent one. It's by Pine and Gilmore, and it's about the experience economy. And this book, which came out in 1998, was predicting, and they were correct, that the economy was going to shift towards experiences. When the book was first written, it ended with experiences, but since then, they've added transformation as the economy that we're all now about to emerge into. And you're going to hear the word transformation all the time. It's going to be something that you're going to be seeing a lot. So what they said, and transformation should be at the end of that. We built the slides in one, and then we sent it to another thing. So
itself.
It has. So this is simply that the economies have shifted from commodities to goods to services to experiences, and now it's about transformation. That's what people are expecting when they engage with you and with what you do.
Can I just butt in and
Please.
say, if you've noticed, our LinkedIn post about the Ambience Lounge, Joe Pine very kindly dropped in a comment and wished us a transformative experience at the show, so I just thought I'd pass that on.
So I'm going to go through each of those points. It's about shifting from thinking about when you're designing something, it's a mind shift from designing an external event, which is something that happens externally, that you pass through. It's often time bound, so it's a moment in time. And the external event is everything that's happening outside of somebody. But what the book and what we teach is you need to shift towards the internal transformation or the internal experience. So experience design is about thinking about the personal response that individuals are going to have to the experience, the external experience that you've designed, and the change in their feelings, their thoughts and their behavior that comes about because of that. And it's really, really important to think about the long-term transformation. What's the why? What's the reason why you're designing that? The next shift you need to make is from stop thinking about the tools that you use to design things and think about the transformation. So, and also to not decide what you're doing before you can articulate why. So you will all have heard start with why, or many of you will as a bit of a mantra, to think about what's the impact that you want to make before you design what you're doing. But also thinking about shifting from activities to emotions. So we can design what will happen. We're all really good at that. We know what we do, we know what works. But it's not what you're designing. What you're aiming for is to design the experience that people have. However, everyone's going to experience things in different ways. So if we can empathize with our audiences, if we know them deeply and we know what they care about, then we can create the conditions for the change that we want to bring about. And then the final one is to shift from story to telling. So understanding a brand, having a really clear message, but if you've got that meaningful connection with the people that you're telling the story to, that's when the magic can happen, and that's when the transformation can happen. So all of this kind of boils down into this ecosystem, which is where, if you think about all three of these things equally, so thinking about your empathy, understanding people's context, their feelings, the reason why they're engaging or not with what you're doing, the spaces and things, so choosing the right platforms, the right tools, thinking about the moments that people are going to have with you, and then thinking about the story and the telling and how that clear message can be taken across. It's the overlap, so the overlaps between these sort of ones in the middle, that's good design, and what's in the middle is great design. And it's the sort of thing that a great designer can do naturally, but actually stepping back and thinking about it, and thinking about how those three things overlap is where experience design happens. I would love to talk to you about this for hours and hours, but we've got lots to get through, so come and find us next door, and you can talk to you more about that. But I'm going to pass back to Stephen now.
Thank you. If any of you were at my talk last year, you'll have seen this slide before, but I don't think I'm the only person that recycles slides. So anyway, just really wanted to make the point that if you do that, if you design your experience based on these principles, the thing that you're actually doing is almost curating, or certainly evoking the emotions from your visitor that are most conducive to your desired impact. So in other words, that are most conducive to whether you want them to be more engaged, to have a better understanding of your mission, to get more out of an exhibition, and of course to support you financially as well. And science shows that, I mean, I know it sounds breathtakingly, blindingly obvious, but happier people feel more comfortable about spending more money, and they have a higher perception of value. So why wouldn't we focus on how we can make sure that our visitors are happy? I know it sounds like a silly, fluffy mantra, but it is genuinely the thing that will stand between you having a good experience and maybe just about making enough money to cover your costs, and having a great experience and people actually really wanting to take a piece of you home, buy into you by becoming a member or a donation or whatever it is. It really makes a huge difference. And I think when this sector is so challenged at the moment, we need to be using these things that are absolutely in our gift, the way we manage our visitors' emotions. So we've designed a map. We've spent many years mapping and working with teams to map the visitor journey. Again, forgive me if I'm teaching Granny to suck eggs, but mapping the visitor journey is a basic and essential tool of designing and delivering great visitor experiences. Actually understanding that your visitor doesn't arrive in a state waiting to be satisfied and then goes through the experience and writes, yes, I was satisfied at the end. I've always said, who wakes up in the morning and says, I hope I have a satisfactory day today? And yet we talk about visitor satisfaction all the time. I think we need to understand that visitors are not in a steady state. As Suzanne says, what's going on around them is affecting them, and they're responding internally. So you need to get inside that opportunity. So one of the things that we recommend is think about, how do I want my visitor to feel when they leave the experience? And it's not the same, just saying satisfied, that's not enough. Think about your experience, your mission, what it is you're trying to achieve. And then the other important thing is to think about, and what emotional state are they in when they arrive? Because that's your clue to what you need to do straight away to start moving them in the direction of ending up in the state that you want them to leave in, if you follow me. So as it happens, we've developed a tool, but the reason I'm sharing it with you is because we're so excited about it. In fact, we're about to use it in a client situation to look at audience development, to really understand in a deep way how people are actually experiencing your visitor experience and journey. And on the three planes that Suzanne has already talked about, in terms of empathy, how are they feeling? In terms of spaces and places, what is happening as opposed to what should be happening? So you might think about that in terms of your KPIs, but also your service standards, also just what you really, really want your visitors to get out of that particular part of the experience. And then in terms of storytelling, is there the narrative of your brand, of the mission of your organisation, or of a particular exhibition consistent and carried through in every interaction, every touch point? And people always kind of seem to think that this stuff is a sort of unaffordable luxury, even though our fundamental purpose is to give people a good experience, isn't it? Would you agree? So I do see some nodding heads. And I hope that's not just going on internally in my head. So what I always say is, well, you're spending all this money already. You think about when you walk into a shop and you bought into the brand and you go into the shop and the assistants are in there just having a chat behind the counter. By the way, I never blame them, I always blame the management for that. But the point is, they're costing that company a lot of money, as is the stock that's sitting in the store, as is the heat and light, the rent and rates, the marketing. So the difference could be that the engaged employees actually know how to talk to customers and add value and take them through the process of engaging, in this case, buying, or they could just be a cost. And so all of those costs you already have. So this is about what we call ROEE, return on excellent experiences. So going back to the three elements, and we're going to kind of chat about this. The first part is for each of the spaces, each of the touch points along the visitor journey, what should be happening? The example I've given there is that people sitting in the cafe, yes, they're having some food, that's important because they need to recharge their batteries, because it's draining visiting museums and cultural institutions, isn't it? And so if people aren't given the opportunity to recharge, the less and less they will actually be getting out of the experience as it goes on. We could again talk all day about that, but equally if they are given the opportunity to recharge, they'll feel more relaxed, they'll reflect on the experience, they'll maybe reflect on the story that you're trying to tell them. What would you add to that, Suzanne?
So this, if we think about the triptych of three different things, this is about the space and what's happening in that space. Creating that opportunity for people to actually go and use a cafe in this example here. But then the design of that space also, it bleeds into the other two areas as well. So how are people feeling in that space? Are the chairs comfortable? I know it seems fundamental, but if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is there somewhere for people to sit? And then also, have you thought about all the different people that are using that space? So you don't design something just for one type of person, but can everyone feel equally comfortable? When people see the other people in that space, do they feel like they belong? So thinking about all three elements, even though this is about the actual physical external experience, if you like, how are people feeling when they're in there, and do they understand how to use that space? Do they feel comfortable with wayfinding and knowing what's there? So we've used this before where we've worked with architects. We've run focus groups when the architects have actually been in the focus group with the people, and they get to hear firsthand people's gut reaction to a space that architecturally is beautiful but maybe is stark and noisy and you can't hear what you're doing. So it's kind of helping people to think not just about the physical space but about people's experience when they're in there, and experience the ambience as well of that space. So not just what furniture you put in, but actually once people are in there, how does it sound, how does it feel, what music is going to be inside that space, and how are you actually going to create that environment whilst you're in there.
That's a very nice cue, thank you very much. Almost as if we planned that. So thinking about empathy and emotions, now I hope you'll all understand why there's a picture of Walt Disney and Mickey Mouse there, but again, an epiphany for me in my career was going to a talk about 20 years ago by the then Visitor Experience Director of MoMA in New York. She'd been tasked with making MoMA more friendly for ordinary visitors. You didn't have to feel as if you had to have a degree in fine art to go in there. And she said, we scoured the world to find a program that wasn't Disney because we didn't feel that Disney was appropriate. And in the end, we went to Disney because they do it the best. And I subsequently used the Disney model, the Disney blueprint, at the National Trust for Scotland, where we kind of transformed the focus of the organisation from just looking in at the work we were doing to looking out at the visitors that we needed to engage and ultimately delight and earn their support. I think George, our colleague from Complete Works, made a point yesterday that, was it 93% of donations at the National Trust for Scotland come from members? So, getting people to the point where they want to become a member, because I always used to have a beef talking about planning your visitor journey, that you'd arrive at a property and there'd be a sign outside saying, join today. And my response would be, join what? Give me a chance to actually think, oh, this is good, but that model is still very much in operation, although let's face it, they are successful in converting members. But coming back to this emotional journey, music, I think, is such, again, an opportunity. Back in the day, I used to, every hour or so, have arguments with the retail staff in the Tower of London shop because the tape had run out. I'd chosen the music and they'd forgotten to turn it over, and of course really they just didn't want to hear the music again. Now of course you can have playlists that last all day, so you could literally curate a playlist and they wouldn't have to hear the same tune twice. But actually, because music plays such a powerful role in creating associations, creating moods, we were talking about some stats last night. If you sell wine and you play German music, you'll sell more German wine. You'll sell more French wine if you play French music. If you play classical music, you'll sell more expensive wine. And I was thinking, when you arrive at an attraction or a museum or a gallery, is there an opportunity to create that sort of sound association? When you arrive at a Disney park, they're playing literally, all the music is curated like a film score. And even in the car park, you hear the music and you start to get excited. Unless you've been dragged there, obviously, by the kids or somebody else who's obsessed with Disney, like me, obviously. But it's so powerful, and yet I can't think of very many attractions at all that really use music, or a soundscape, doesn't have to be music, in a sort of concerted way. So that's my tip on that. And
with the emotional journey, we're not just talking about the time that they're spending with you in the space that you're in. So obviously, yes, think about how you want them to feel when they leave, but also think about how they're going to feel when they come. So this is again about empathy and understanding who people are. What sort of day are they having? Why are they coming here? Are they coming with their parent hat on, or as an interested person who just wants to find out about your content? So thinking about the emotional journey beginning in the days before they arrive, or even maybe this emotional journey, if you're talking about membership, maybe this is a 10-year journey that they're going to go on, and you're going to shift them from being vaguely aware of who you are to coming once or twice, to becoming someone who's a member, to then becoming sort of a lifelong fan of yours. So that emotional journey is really the story, the narrative path that they're going to go on, who they were when they came in and what's the transformation you want to design for them, and how are they going to be and who are they going to be when they end. And also to say, we're not just designing some lovely up, hooray sort of experience, but also understanding and acknowledging that there'll be some down moments when they're queuing or when they're sort of using some facilities that you don't have so much control on. But also adding those little bits of friction, a little bit of uncertainty, or a little bit of what's going to happen next, and nervousness and not sure what's going to be behind this door, because those moments of frictions are the one that wakes them up and turns something from just being a nice, satisfying experience to being something they're really going to remember when they actually opened that door and found something they weren't expecting. So the emotional journey is like designing an album. It's like literally, when are we going to put this track in? And it's a linear, in this case, it's a linear journey where you're taking them where you want them to be, guiding them through that journey, through the spaces that you've designed, and also through just sort of the clues you give them about where to go. Which leads us very nicely, it's almost like we practiced, to the next one, which is about story.
Yeah. Just before that, I was going to say that, following on from what Suzanne was saying, you can literally design for each of those moments, what is the emotion we want here? What might it be if we don't do something about it? Nonplussed, confused, disappointed, or what could it be if we actually design what could happen here? And by the way, in case I forget at the end, we do have our Ambience Playbook, which we launched at the show 3 years ago. We've updated it now, and it has a step-by-step guide to doing a lot of this. So you can find the visitor journey map and other tools in there. If you just go to our website, you'll find it there. So yes, the power of stories.
Yeah, so storytelling, as I just said, is really important, because you're thinking about there are so many different ways of talking about this. There's the story of the people that come through the space, so what's their story, who were they when they came in before, but also the story that you're telling about your attraction or your experience. So this is your example from the Eden Project?
Yeah, I've always loved the fact that when you go to the Eden Project, literally, as you go down the drive, I'm sure many of you have been, there's a sort of sequence of signs that tells you who we are, what we believe, what we're trying to do here, and maybe what you'll do. I always remember a phrase, we actually used it to kind of transform the way we thought about Scottish tourism, where we had lots of people who came together to have conversations that might just go somewhere. And that phrase was taken from the Eden Project welcome signage that said, we've tried to create a place to hold and host conversations that might just go somewhere. What we're trying to do next door as well. So what I loved about it was straight away you get the story, you're set up to understand now the whole experience, so long as it delivers that. what you should expect and where you fit in, because it's also about what you can do going away with the new inspiration or insight that you've gained from that particular experience. Did you want to add anything to that? Or?
I could, but I would just keep going on and on about it for ages. Because
it's a nice change for me not to be doing that, and for them as well. So if you think back to the map that we showed you, where we had the emotional journey with the ups and downs, and the story journey also follows an arc, but they might not be exact, they might not match. So thinking about the narrative structure of your experience, and that mapping that against the emotional journey that people go on, but also against the kind of the touch points that you have, can give you a really good view of how people are experiencing it, or how you hope people to experience it. So we use that sort of mapping thing as an evaluation tool. So we use it when we go to an experience, and we use it to kind of, we might be looking to see how people are engaging or what sort of emotions people are having, just to sort of to gauge how that experience is going. But we also use it as a design tool, so we can actually think about what do we want to see with people. And do you want to share the next slide? Yeah. So I again, if you've been to one of my talks before, I always talk about this book, Unreasonable Hospitality, written by Will Guidara, who with his partner in crime, the chef at 11 Madison Park, took it to be the #1 restaurant in the world. And there's also a strong association and inspiration in the Disney Plus series The Bear, if you've watched that. And it's really what it takes, to really do this, to achieve any level of greatness, it's in the detail. God is in the details. And as he says there, stay in your own hotel, walk your visitor journey as a visitor. Do not skate over the surface, just saying hi to everyone and thinking everything's fine. Actually try and find a new way to look at it and think about all of those elements that we've talked about. Also, in any sort of design process, we would strongly recommend that you involve your team, because your team are the ones who have most to gain by being involved, but also you have most to gain by getting access to their far superior knowledge of actually what happens in the experience. And then, of course, when it's designed or refreshed, they'll own it, and then they'll be a much better place to help you deliver it. So, this is not meant to sound like a plug for Insight, our mystery visitor tool, but I just want to tell you, what we do with it, which is to look at the visitor journey through each of those 3 planes. So we're currently working with a client who has 19 cultural venues of huge variation, and we've been able to create for them a dashboard where they can see how we're doing on the storytelling, which is an issue for them because they want the umbrella organisation to be understood and engaged with by all of their visitors and supported. How are we doing on the KPIs, because they have commercial and other KPIs that they need to be happening at the different touch points. And then how are we doing in terms of the emotional journey? And we found it was so powerful to be able to say, at this point in your journey, we felt confused, or we felt disappointed, or we felt underwhelmed, just as much as, this point was amazing. And we really, really sort of recommend that as a kind of, as a touch point or a benchmark touch point for your whole experience. So the purpose of Insight is to give you a dashboard that you can then measure against on an ongoing basis, so that you can always see how you're doing and if improvements or enhancements have worked. So if you want to know more about that, either scan the QR code or you can go to our website again and find out more information. So Suzanne has a little kind of challenge for you now.
So I find it impossible to talk about this without actually giving people a chance to try it out for themselves. So we want to suggest that you choose your journey for the rest of the day, maybe just for the next 10 minutes, that's fine. Choose whether you want to go on an emotional journey through the show, or a sensory journey, or a story journey, or indeed maybe all 3. But we want you to sort of leave here noticing something different. So you might choose to have a story journey, in which case look around you and just absorb what information is being shared with you and think what stories are being told to you, what's drawing you in, what's engaging to you personally about the stories that people are telling you around here. Or you might want to go on an emotional journey. So notice how you're feeling. How are you feeling right now? When you walk around the space, at what points do you, what are the high points, what are the low points? Just sort of make a mental map in your mind about the emotional arc that you're going on in this journey. Or you might want to go on a sensory journey. So actually through the space, try not to think about the normal sense that we use our sight to have a look around the space, but think about what are you smelling, what are you hearing, how does the ground feel beneath your feet? What else are you using to navigate that you might not be conscious that you're doing that? So just kind of try this idea out of experiencing the show today with these 3 elements and see what stands out for you and what's most helpful. And then come and tell us about it, because we'll be next door. We'd love to hear from you. Just come and have a chat and come and tell us how you feel. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Emotional about the presentation. We have about 5 minutes if there are any questions from the floor. Has anyone got a question they would like to put to either Stephen, Suzanne or both? We have.
Hello, thank you very much. Great talk. My question is about every time I've considered or spoken to my staff team about music or scent, I get just all the objections about, we won't be able to hear customers, or it'll upset people, or the smell will give people a headache. So what are your opinion on that?
Well, I'm sort of just an old curmudgeon about this now. I just say, well, tough, we're here for the visitors, not for ourselves. But no, in all seriousness, share some of this information with them. The fact that actually this can be transformative. Wouldn't you like your visitors to be happier when they come into the shop or the admission area? Wouldn't you want them to already be feeling up for the adventure or the experience ahead? And then get them involved in choosing as well. So fascinating, and Gordon knows this because at the Spring Fair at the NEC, we were involved in a collaboration with a fragrance company to create a fragrance for the 75th anniversary of Spring Fair. And we had the opportunity to meet the perfumer and actually learn about how the fragrance was put together to actually create the associations of the heritage of the fair, but also spring and also innovation. And so if you can get them interested and then get them involved in helping to choose these things and curate them, starting with how do we want people to feel, I think that's very powerful.
Yeah, I think because they are absolutely right, and acknowledge that and say yes, and how do we want people to feel, and what does how does the current smell in here or the current music, how is that making people feel, and how can we help improve that? So task them with coming up with the answer.
Good luck.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? We do.
Hello, I work at the Imperial War Museum, and some of our galleries, like the Holocaust Gallery, is quite, for some people, a very horrific experience.
Yeah.
Do you think this can be used for when they come out of the gallery to not make it better, but to affect people's feelings, to sort of try and negate some of the upset, etc.?
100%.
Absolutely, yeah. And it like a first step would be to do that research and find out. I mean, how people feel because you can see it, and you know the reactions that people have had. But actually acknowledging that and holding on to that is a good thing. Some negative experiences, that's possibly the reason why they've come. So I've seen places, and you may have this as well, a space where people can then go and sit with that experience, and acknowledging and holding on to that as a positive reflection on what it is.
And maybe do some actual research with visitors to find out what would you like, what would help you, and see if you can design something that responds to that. I think that's a fantastic question, and a fantastic example of what we're talking about. Yeah,
because the last thing we want to do is flatten it.
Yeah.
Great question. We've got time for one more. I can see someone here.
Hello, thank you.
Hello.
There is a wealth of music out there. What do you do to try and find the perfect piece of music?
Who wants to answer?
Yeah, where do you start? I guess it needs to be relevant. it needs to resonate, and it needs to do the job you need it to do. So music is a tool as much as anything else. So testing what works, seeing what doesn't, without knowing where you would play it would be hard to say.
I think, again, though, you could go back, there's various ways you could do it. You could go back to what emotion are we trying to create? And, to be very simplistic, you just type that into Spotify and find out what they come up with. Or you can think about, well, what are the core values of our experience, and sort of think about, well, what would be appropriate? We don't necessarily want, if we're a historic site, to play music of that period, but, what are the sort of ideas, the stories that we could use to evoke and create a playlist? I mean, creating the playlist is really easy once you've thought about that, I would suggest.
Great stuff. I think that wraps up the session just now. What I would say is that Stephen and Suzanne, could you maybe hold back for a couple of minutes in case anybody wants to ask you a